So in the last part of this lecture, we were talking about different types of WBCs, their origin as well, that we came across this name, which is hematopoietic stem cell. That is actually the kind of stem cells that gives rises to all the different kinds of WBCs, as you can see on the screen. And then we also talked about their subdivisions, like if we talk about lymphocytes, we have B, T, and natural killer cells. And then we took help from these different lines like help me catch some and so on to help us memorize different things like their quantity or percentages within our body, and then also the categories of T lymphocytes as well as B lymphocytes. Now we are moving towards the main thing, which is the type of immunity or the types of immunity. And as you can see on the screen, there are two main types of immunity. So in our body, actually, there are layers of defense mechanism. The first layer is known as the innate immune system, and the second line of response is known as acquired immune system. We will talk about them briefly in this part of lecture, and then we will also talk about these two types of immunity in detail in the later or the coming lectures. Now you can see on the screen that there are specific words written within the bracket. First is non-specific for innate and specific for acquired or adaptive immunity. So I'm going to explain these words within the bracket. Again, I am taking the help of a kind of situation or scenario. Suppose there is a blast within our city. God forbid there is this blast in some specific area of the city, and after hearing the blast, the first responders or the first team that will reach the site of blast would be the local police, our local police department. And they will go there, they will inspect, and they will try to find out the reason behind the blast, whether that blast is due to some kind of an accident, some gas cylinder burst, and due to that particular accident we heard extreme noise, or whether this kind of blast is due to some kind of a terror attack, some kind of criminal activity, some hardcore criminals are there to control that particular region and terrorize people. So to judge that, always the first responders would be the local police department. And so you can see that they will go there, they will cordon off the area, and they will try to find the reason behind the blast, right? Quite similarly, in our case, in the case of our immune system, the first responders, whenever pathogen enters within our body, the first responders are always the cells of innate immune system. So they are the first line of defense, or we can also call them the first line of immune response. So you can judge that this kind of mechanism, this kind of system relies on a mechanism that is already existing within our body. So before the infection, this innate immune system is ready to respond generally against any sort of pathogen. And it is non-specific because it will respond to the attack irrespective of the kind of pathogen, whether it is fungi, bacteria, it is a deadly virus or not, it will always respond. So you can, in other words, you can say that its response is general and it will always respond against pathogens irrespective of their kind or type. Then comes the next thing, acquired or immune system. We know that we are assuming that the attack or the blast was not accidental, it was actually by some hardcore criminals, and to create mayhem and terror, the hardcore criminals are using or creating these blasts. And then police is not able to fight them. Police won't be able to fight them because they are carrying some specialized weapons, while police has the normal weapons. So they will then call upon, they will then take the help of some special forces. Like for instance, here we can take the example of army, that if they're unable to fight them, they will take or they will call the army, and the army will come into action, and they will fight against those particular hardcore criminals. Why? Because they also have advanced weapons and they can fight against those particular specific hardcore criminals. So you can get the idea that if the innate immune system fails, you can see some words within the bracket as well. If innate fails, here you can see, if I highlight this portion, you can see that if innate system fails, then the adaptive system or the acquired immune system comes into action. And so we can call the second system, or we can call this system as the second line of defense. And it would be specific. We know that, like the way army is specifically taking action against terrorists, specifically taking action against the hardcore criminals. Quite similarly, this adaptive system, as the name suggests, it adopts against specific pathogens. So it is there to counter or fight with the specific deadly pathogens. So we can say that you can get the concept of before and after, that this immune system relies on mechanism that adopts, not exist, it adopts after the infection. And I was talking about dendrite cell earlier in the first part of this lecture, that that particular cell creates the link between two kind of system. So these are the two system. Between these two systems, dendritic cells are acting as a link, or the innate system with the help of dendritic cell will give message to the adaptive or acquired immune system, and then they will come into the action and they will help clear all the different kinds of pathogens from the body. I am coming to the details of innate immune system, but before doing so, you can see that the acquired immune system is handled by two kind of cells, two kind of lymphocytes, in fact, the T and B lymphocytes. So I hope with this story you can differentiate easily between the two kind of system. So the general response is from the innate immune system, and the more specific response is from the other system, which is the adaptive system. Now we are moving towards the next thing, which is innate immune system. So I have already told you that it is the first line of defense, and it is not specific at all. And you can see that it doesn't differentiate between different kinds of pathogens that are attacking the body. And as I told you before, that this system exists before the infection. So that means the components that are required for fighting the pathogens, they're already formed or present within the body. And this kind of system responds quickly as compared to the adaptive system, because adaptive system is dependent on the innate system. When innate system will send a message through dendritic cells to the other adaptive system, then that particular system will come into action. So in this particular, innate immunity response would be quick, response would be within the minutes of infection. And it also depend on our genes or the genetic makeup, as it is its name suggests, innate in normal English, it means inborn, inbuilt ability. So it depends on the genetic makeup. And if I talk about this particular system, it has a drawback as well. It has no memory. In this particular immune system, there is no concept of memory cells. There is absolutely nothing related to the memory in that particular case. So they will respond similarly after the repeated exposures. If we are exposed to the same kind of pathogens again and again, or the different kind of pathogens, its response would be identical towards any kind of pathogen. I will talk more about the memory cells when we will talk about the adaptive immune system. Now we are moving toward the next thing. What exactly are the components or mechanism behind innate immunity? Earlier in the first part of the video, I told you about the mechanical barriers. Now mechanical barriers can be, there are many mechanical barriers like skin. And I have already told you in my earlier story, in the story of my first video, that skin is the primary or the initial barrier between pathogen and the body. Then also there is this mucous membrane. We have this sticky substance, mucus. We haven't talked about this particular thing, that in the stomach we have acid and the pH is acidic there, and that particular pH also helps to kill the pathogens that are ingested via food, through food. And if you look at this particular picture, we have our respiratory tract, we have our nasal cavity, and I have already mentioned that this nasal cavity or breathing passageway also has the hair-like projection cilia to trap those particular or any particular pathogens. So mucus as well as cilia are there to stop, slow down, or eventually trap pathogens within our body. And then if we talk about, there is this word humoral mechanism, and then we will talk about the cellular defense mechanism. The major difference between the two is that in, as the name suggests, in cellular defense mechanism, the cells are involved. There would be engulfing, the involvement of engulfing of the infected cell or the pathogen. But if we talk about humoral mechanism, it is more related to the fluids that will eventually reach or kill any particular pathogen or neutralize any particular pathogen. So the humoral mechanisms, in the humoral mechanism, we have lysozymes. You know that our saliva as well as tears, they have this substance or chemical known as lysozyme. And this lysozyme can counter or can kill pathogens. And then there are some other things as well, as you can see on the screen, proteins. There are different other proteins, complement and interferons that can also hinder, counter, or kill, eventually kill pathogens. And then if we talk about the cellular mechanism, you will see that there are certain cells like NK cells, the natural killer cells. You can see the picture as well. And then we have this neutrophil. And then we also have this macrophage. If we talk about neutrophils and macrophage, they are involved in engulfing. They engulf different pathogens or even the whole infected cell that is beyond saving. So that kind of cells usually eat or engulf the infected cell, as well as some cells also have the ability to just engulf the viral particle or any pathogenic particle. Then we also have mast cells, then we have basophils and eosinophils. So these, all these cells are part of the innate immune mechanism, and more specifically they are part of the cellular defense mechanism of the innate immunity. So you can get the idea that within the innate immunity there are two elements that are fighting against the pathogen. In the innate immunity, the barriers are there, mechanical barriers, physical barriers are there to stop the particles from entering within our body. And then we know that there is this humoral and cellular defense mechanism. It's another element of innate immunity which tries to engulf, kill, neutralize the pathogen. So I hope the picture is now clear regarding this innate immunity. Next come the adaptive immunity, and as you can see, we already talked about it, that it's the second line of defense. It is specific and it depends on the innate immunity. If innate immunity is unable to fight, as I've told you earlier, that if policemen are unable to fight hardcore criminals, they will call upon or they will take the help of special forces or army. Similarly, if the innate system fails or the innate system is not strong enough to fight against any particular or specific pathogen, then this adaptive immune system will come into action. And it depends on the resistance acquired throughout our life. And obviously, as I told you earlier, if the response of innate immune system is quick because it is general and they are the first responders, this adaptive immune system is slower as compared to the first system. Why? Because it takes time. It takes time and it requires certain authorization for these army men to come and counter the terrorist or counter the hardcore criminals. They can't immediately come out. They will only come out if police are unable to fight the criminals. So due to that particular reason, similarly in our case, adaptive immune system is slower because it is dependent on innate immunity. Once innate immunity calls for help, then they can come and finish off the pathogens there. So it takes days while the innate immunity is active after the few minutes of infection. So it also depends on the genetic events and cellular growth. And one striking difference or the drastic difference between innate and adaptive immune system is this green one. It has memory. The memory cells are part of this adaptive immune system. So if same kind of pathogen infected us, and the patient recovered from that particular pathogen or disease, and if again that particular pathogen attacks the same person, it would have memory of the previous event. And due to that particular memory cells, due to that particular memory and memory cells, it will better fight against the same virus if that particular virus hits us again. So repeated, as you can see on the slide, repeated exposure will lead to faster, stronger response. That's why if someone recovers from any particular disease, viral infection or bacterial problem, if the same pathogen attacks the person, the response is quicker and stronger because the components are already there to fight against that particular virus. So the exposure helps to make our immune system strong. Then comes the next thing, its mechanism. As we discussed in the case of innate immunity, there are two different mechanisms, humoral as well as the cellular defense mechanism. In this particular case, we can also call it cell-mediated immune response, and hence you can see within the bracket CMIR, cell-mediated immune response. And it is mainly controlled by the T lymphocytes. And we will talk about the B lymphocyte as well in the next response, HIR, the humoral immune response. The major difference between the two things is that this T lymphocytes eliminate the microbes within the cell, or we can also call it intracellular response. It eliminates intracellular microbes that are present within the cell after phagocytosis, after the phagocytes have worked against them. If some elements are still present within the cell, then T lymphocytes will go there and will eliminate those microbes. And you can see the picture, the blue picture as well. These are the T lymphocytes. And then if we talk about the humoral immune system, I told you that it involves some certain fluids or the substances. So here you can see that it involves antibodies. So antibodies are involved within this system or this humoral immune response. And you know that they are also known as immunoglobulins. There is this involvement of B lymphocyte, or we will discuss that particular portion or that particular system in detail in future videos or in the coming videos. But right now we are just generally discussing immune system. So the major difference between CMIR and HIR in adaptive immunity is that T lymphocytes are there to counter microbes within the cell, or they eliminate intracellular microbes. But if we talk about B lymphocytes, you can see the picture as well. They are there to eliminate extracellular microbes and obviously their toxins. So they counter or fight with the microbes that are present outside the healthy cells. So you can judge that by comparing these two mechanisms, that one is involved in killing microbes within the cell and other one is involved in killing the microbes outside the body cell. So that was all about the innate immunity as well as the adaptive immunity. Quickly, in the last portion, we can talk about the physical barriers. I have already told you about physical barriers, skin, mucous membrane, and so on. But they can also be categorized into three types, which are mechanical barriers, then chemical barriers, and then biological barriers. And if we talk about the mechanical ones, we know that there is the skin, cilia, mucous membrane, they all are part of mechanical barrier. Then I already told you about lysozyme, that they are present in the tear, saliva, and they also kill pathogens. Then there is this liquid portion, mucus, the sticky substance, and then there's this acid within our stomach. So you can see that all these fall under the category of chemical barriers. And then biological barrier. We know that there are certain harmless bacteria within our body, within our stomach. They by growing within our body, they are in turn stopping the growth of some harmful bacteria or some harmful pathogens. So if they are residing within our body, if they are present within our body, they are actually helping us. They are not letting the harmful bacteria flourish or grow, or harmful pathogens to grow. So this comes under a biological barrier. This situation or this phenomena can be categorized under this heading, which is biological barrier. And lastly, we can talk about the inflammation and fever. They may seem bad At first, they may sound that inflammation and fever is bad for us, but in turn, it is also helping us counter pathogens. If there is inflammation within our particular area, then at that particular region, white blood cells are helping us. White blood cells are countering or fighting pathogens at that particular area so that the problem or infection won't spread to the whole body or the other parts of the body. And then comes fever. There is this involvement of cytokines. We will talk about that particular thing in the coming lectures, and we will cover both these things in detail as well. Fever also helps us by raising the temperature of body. Actually, the bacteria or pathogens are eliminated, and there is this involvement of substances. I will only take the name of one substance, as I already told you that name, that cytokines is somehow involved in this fever. We will talk about that particular thing in the future lectures. Thank you for listening. I hope till now both the parts are quite helpful. Thank you.